Hey, welcome back for another episode of the Fleet Success Show. I'm your host, Josh Turley, joined today in studio by our newest colleague here at RTA, Scott Rood. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. This is second day on the job, and a lot of stuff to go through right now.
Yep.
Just trying to get my feet on the ground here.
Right. So it's definitely been a whirlwind. As you and I have known each other for a few years now. But yeah, we're wasting no time getting you in front of the cameras and on the podcast. Want to get our listeners more familiar with you.
Right, and no time to get me on a project too. So that's going to happen next week, and
We got a lot of
all excited.
right?
Yeah,
it's a good spot to be in. So,
Yes.
So for our listeners, it kind of, if they don't know who you are, haven't met you before, give them a little backstory. Tell them a little about yourself.
Sure. When I started my fleet career in 1981, when I joined the Air Force, I started out as a vehicle mechanic, and while I was in the Air Force, I traveled. I started out in Alaska, came to McCord here in Washington State.
Yeah.
And then I went to Germany. Me and the wife liked Germany, liked Italy, so we did a follow-on and stayed in Europe for another tour in Italy. After that, they put me in recruiting, so I had to do recruiting for about 4 years.
Try to convince people to join
the Air Force. Yeah. It's just a cutthroat business, but I survived it, and then I went to back to Alaska again, in vehicle maintenance, of course.
Yeah.
Got promoted to Master Sergeant while I was up there. Then I went to Alleman Air Force Base, where I was the base vehicle maintenance manager, and that was how I ended my career.
Okay.
So I retired.
So how long was that you were in the Air Force?
I was in the Air Force for 22 years.
All right.
From 81 to 2003. So once I decided to retire, me and the wife talked about it, and we decided to move back to Washington State. Got a job with the state of Washington General Administration as their fleet maintenance manager.
Okay.
I did that for about 2 years. They were going through some growing pains because they were growing quite a bit. At that time, I went ahead and I was working on my bachelor's and master's degree, one right after the other.
Well, what was it that drew you to Washington State?
Well, that's where I met my wife. I met my wife at McCord.
That sounds like an awesome spot.
Yeah, so it was, they were going to give me a job at Holloman as a civil service, but, me and the wife talked. We liked Holloman, New Mexico, but we decided, let's go back to Washington State. We love it up there, so that's why we went back up to Washington State. Even though I'm not originally from Washington State, I grew up in upstate New York.
Okay.
So, anyways, I worked at the state for a couple of years, but I had, I had an ambition to move up in the ranks. So I took a job down in Vancouver at the public utilities. So I worked there for a couple of years, and I was the fleet warehouse supervisor, but I wanted to be a fleet manager.
Yeah.
And then over at Public Works a few years later, their fleet manager left, or he retired, and I applied for the job and got it. And I worked 8.5 years for the county.
Okay.
Then after that, continuing my career, I wanted to go into consulting.
Yeah.
And then Paul Loria, he hired me to come to work for Mercury.
What was it? Obviously, Paul Loria is a well-known name in the industry, right? One of the smartest guys I've ever met.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. What attracted him to you? Like, how did you guys
It's
get
in 2017, he came and he did a fleet study for my county.
Okay.
So he did the study. He did the outbrief and everything with my senior leadership. And then a year later, the position came available. So I was actually talking to Steve Saltzgiver on the phone, and I said, "Hey, I saw you guys had an advertisement for a consultant."
Yeah.
He goes, "Yeah, you should apply for it." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to move to Maryland." And he's like, "Well, you don't have to." So about 45 minutes went by, and then I got an email from Paul Loria and said, "Hey, looking forward to seeing your resume."
Nice.
And then it was
kind of the rest is history.
Yep, the rest is history.
Fun.
So that's pretty much how I got into fleet and then into consulting.
Okay.
While I was in Mercury, I probably did over 100 studies when I was at Mercury.
Yeah.
But again, I wanted to change jobs. Was looking to come to work for a software company.
Okay.
And you were gracious enough to hire me.
It was, and for our listeners, if you've never had the chance to meet Scott, and I'll tell you, one of my favorite things is we meet on the trade show floors and just kind of run into each other in the circuit. But you're probably one of the most affable, nicest guys I've ever met. Right?
Oh, thank you.
Very genuine, down to earth, a super, super lovely human being, right? And so that was the first thing that I noticed about you, right? Is just how easy you were to get along with everybody around you. But looking at your career as a consultant, you've done 100 different fleet studies. You've worked in fleet for decades, right?
Correct. Yes.
Why this industry? Why do you keep sticking around for fleet?
Well, this chapter, you guys intrigued me because, I wanted to get into the software business a little bit. I know I'll be on the consultant team, but I look forward to working with production and help out there as well. But the real reason is when I go out on these studies, I always notice that the clients, they have a hard time working with their fleet information system. Yeah. And what it comes down to, in my opinion, is that they don't really know how to use the system to its full capacity.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time, helping guys out in the field on several different software applications, not just yours. I mean, there has been others where they just didn't understand it. They didn't know how to get reports. They didn't know how to, do inventory. They didn't know how to set up the technicians with iPads on the floor so they could track their billable hours and stuff like that. And I spent a lot of time helping them do that. Yeah. So now what I'd like to do is come over on the production or over into your company and help the clients. I look forward to getting out, meeting with the clients and help them, understand their fleet information systems better.
Yeah. Well, and you've got a little bit of an in on the other side of it too, which is, hey, if training is the answer, because most of the time, as I talk to Tony and Steve and Mark, and really clients in general, is the FMIS is usually not the problem, right? It almost always is. It's like you haven't gotten the training, you haven't invested in your people enough, and now you're blaming the tool when it's you, right? Like it's you as the fleet manager, and you just aren't dedicating the time, or maybe you don't have the budget for it. Maybe it's not intuitive. I mean, there's legit reasons why you'd want to switch, but 9 times out of 10,
they just don't understand it. Yeah. And they have a good system usually. They have a good system usually. Yeah. But like you were just saying, they don't invest in the training. Mm-hmm. They don't invest in the upgrades. I mean, there was a lot of them they're using where they still they're on the GUI.
They're still using the system they bought back in
and they never updated. They never updated the system, so they're missing out on all that technology that you guys have created, that we have created over the years to make the systems better.
Yeah. But I think that's, as I've seen, usually I challenge the sales reps to ask this question. Sometimes they don't, but I'll usually force them to say, hey, ask the question of, well, why wasn't the last implementation a success? Like if you're thinking about switching and it's because of training, why is this going to be any different? What are you going to do differently this time? And sometimes I think as a consultant, you guys can come in, and it's like listening to your mom and dad. You don't really want to hear from your parents. The city manager tells you to do something. You don't really want to do it. But a consultant comes in and now all of a sudden you want to listen, right? Or flip it around. A lot of times the fleet managers know what to do, but the higher-ups don't want to listen. They need validation.
Absolutely. And that happens more times than not.
Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. They're just looking for looking for us to come in and say, kind of just to verify what they already know.
Yeah.
And then report that to the senior leadership. And they're like, well, we've seen this before.
Right. I guess, what we said was true,
Yeah.
What we're doing.
Exactly. Exactly. And I can do that, and I can relate to them because I went through consultant projects, both, like I said, in 2005 when I was with the state and when I was with Clark County.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew what to expect.
Where can you get access to insightful keynotes from fleet industry leaders and experts, live hands-on training classes, and the opportunity to network with fleet professionals across the country? Only at the Fleet Event of the Year. RTA Connect 2024 in Atlanta, Georgia. Join us October 7th to 11th and get the tips, tricks, and tools you need to take your fleet to the next level. Learn the latest best practices to improve performance from RTA's fleet experts. Join hundreds of fleet professionals from every industry to learn everything from employee retention and growth to the latest in fleet tech. Ensure you're building the best fleet in the world at Connect 2024.
Registration is now open and class seats are limited. Visit www.rtafleet.com/connect to learn more.
So the last time I had Mercury come in when I was the fleet manager, it was like I already knew what they were going to report on.
Yeah.
I just needed them to come in and convince my senior leadership, which they did. They came in and they did a great presentation, and I got what I needed out of the study, and I also got a job out of the study.
That was a win-win-win.
Oh, it was really big win.
And it's interesting, though, is that, Mark and I talk a lot about the ability for fleet managers to tell their story and just how critical of a skill set that is, right? To paint a picture, to be able to use words, but also use graphs and charts and data.
Correct.
To be able to tell your story so that you can sell your position and convince other people to, hey, line up behind the cause. This is what we need to do. And a lot of fleet managers, we don't get that kind of training. We're not told how to build a nice report that a city manager wants to see. I could do something for a tech or do something for a shop supervisor, but, now I got to manage up and do something that...
Yeah, it's just that what I always recommend is they create a fleet digest where they have all their KPIs, the ones that mean the most to them. Post that, send it up to the senior leadership, show them what you're doing.
Yeah.
Also, I want to put in that they should apply for 100 best fleets too.
Yeah.
And submit the application, because you get that you get on the list of 100 best fleets, and then you tell your story. Your leadership is going to start looking at that, and they're going to say, "Wow, we have a really good fleet, and we have a really good fleet manager. We need to invest in them."
Yeah. So looking back, 100 different fleet engagements you've done, what's been your most memorable experience? Just like the one you look back on most fondly that made an impact on you.
It was a Canadian company. We did a remote best practices.
Mm-hmm.
They liked what we did, so then we went back because they wanted to do more. So we had to go back. We had to actually go on site. So I traveled to Canada and went in there and built them a implementation plan.
Okay.
They also were looking at an FMIS, so we helped. We wrote that into the new scope. Really nice people. The Canadians treat you really good, and I really appreciated the welcome we got there. Plus, their staff was really easy to work with. So that's probably one of the memorable ones I had. Another one's down in Texas. We did just a cost of services and replacement study, but they liked what we did for them so much, it just kept snowballing. We kept getting add-ons, and and the staff there again were really, really nice to work with. So I really those are memorable ones there.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite is, just getting to know the people, because the people in fleet, in my mind, they're just super down to earth, salt of the earth type of people.
Absolutely. And, the big thing is in consulting is when you go in, you have to win them over sometime because they think you're there to take their job. We're not. We are there to help them improve. And once you can communicate that to them, everything starts to go smooth after that.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of change management you've had to learn, right? And definitely winning over the people. What's been the most bizarre experience? And you can protect the innocent here, so we don't need any names, but just something you look back on, you're like, wow, that was just...
Well, we did a study, but I don't want to name where it was or, with the shop or anything. So we went, it was in a pretty...
48, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was in a pretty rough neighborhood, and we pulled up to the shop, and they actually had bullet holes in the door.
Oh,
the shop door. So that was like, oh no. And we were meeting with the swing shift, so it was, getting close to
dusk and midnight.
Yeah. So that was a little bizarre.
Well, if there's anything you want our listeners to know about you, what's the one thing you want them to kind of take away as they get their first introduction to Scott Rood?
If you want us to come in and do a fleet study, I'm very upfront with your people. I treat them with respect. I do dig into the data pretty deep to, to figure out, the state of your fleet. But the thing is, when we're finished, I'm going to give you very implementable recommendations that you can take immediately and start working on to improve your fleet.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say one thing that you probably don't know about Scott. You have an interesting side hustle hobby. You call it passion project.
Yeah. You want me to talk about
Yeah, absolutely. You're the only guy I know who does this, so of course.
Yeah, so what I do in this, I like to golf a lot, so I play a lot of golf, but I also do golf club repair. I also do make golf clubs and do fittings for some of my friends and clients, more lately clients. So, if they break a shaft, I'm able to, extract the shaft out. It doesn't matter where it broke on the club, I can get it out and get a new shaft in the head, no problem.
It's like a custom Scott Rood special.
Yes.
I like it. I thought that was the most fascinating thing. I've never met anybody that does golf clubs.
Yeah.
So.
No, I just did it. It was just by accident. Basically, I was looking online and I saw this company that was selling, components. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a set. At that time I broke my foot and it was, I was down. I couldn't play golf. So I wanted to do something.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and I ordered everything I needed, made myself a set of irons. A friend of mine at work saw them and said, "Hey, I want a set too." So I ordered him the components. I made him a set, and after that, word of mouth got out, and
yeah,
I've been busy ever since.
That's awesome. Well, now it's really going to get out. So, hey, well, thanks for taking some time with us this afternoon.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Really glad to have you here on the team.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, and with that, we'll to all our listeners, reach out if you have any questions about Scott, want to get to know him a little better. If you want to, hear more about consulting and what it is we do here on that front, just email podcast@rtafleet.com. Love to hear your questions. Love to answer any here on the podcast. As you know, Mark, Scott, Steve, Tony, they all jump on here as regular co-hosts with me. So anytime, we'd love to hear from you. But until next time.